Her family sold her as infertile, but a billionaire got her pregnant in just 3 days. She thought her life was over the night her own father auctioned her off like she was nothing. But when a powerful stranger stood up in that crowd, everything changed. He didn't want to own her. He wanted to save her. Only, no one expected what came next, because just days later, the woman everyone called barren collapsed, and the doctor said she was pregnant. Now the town is whispering, the press is hunting, and the man who rescued her could lose everything. But there's something they don't know, a secret buried in his past that ties them together in ways neither of them could imagine. Was it fate, or something divine? And when love itself becomes a miracle, how far will they go to protect it? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The humid summer air hung heavy over Green Hollow's town square, where strings of twinkling lights cast a deceptively cheerful glow over the gathering crowd. The annual charity auction had always been a highlight of the community calendar, bringing together locals for an evening of generosity and neighborly spirit. Wooden folding chairs creaked beneath sundress-clad women fanning themselves with paper programs, while men in pressed shirts clustered in small groups, their quiet chatter mixing with the chirp of crickets and the gentle whir of overhead fans. At the front of the square, a weathered wooden platform served as the auction stage, displaying everything from Miss Betty's famous peach cobbler to hand-stitched quilts that had taken months to complete. The auctioneer, Mr. Thompson, maintained a steady rhythm of calls and responses, his voice carrying across the square with practiced ease. Next up, we have a beautiful apple pie from the Methodist Ladies Auxiliary. Do I hear $10? $10 from the gentleman in the blue shirt. The mood shifted subtly when they began auctioning off services, local folks offering their time and skills to raise money for the community center. Mrs. Wilson would teach piano lessons, Doc Green promised a free dental cleaning, and young Tommy offered to mow lawns all summer. In the back of the crowd, Dale Cole stood quietly observing, his tall frame setting him apart from the locals. His steel-gray eyes took in every detail, assessing the community he was considering for his foundation's next project. His crisp white shirt and tailored slacks marked him as an outsider, though he carried himself with an unassuming grace that kept others from staring too openly. The peaceful evening shattered when Harold Grace stumbled onto the platform, dragging his daughter Lila behind him. The smell of whiskey rolled off him in waves as he grabbed the microphone from the startled auctioneer. "Got something special to offer." Harold's words slurred. Together, his face flushed with drink and cruel intention. "My worthless daughter here needs a husband. Can't give you children, but she can cook and clean well enough." Lila Grace stood frozen, her slim frame trembling in a faded blue dress that had seen better days. Her hands clutched at the worn fabric, knuckles white with tension. The warm evening air suddenly felt suffocating as hundreds of eyes turned toward her, some pitying, others gleaming with malicious entertainment. "That's the infertile one," someone whispered, the words carrying clearly in the shocked silence. "Poor thing can't have babies." More whispers rippled through the crowd. "Harold's girl. The one whose husband left. Such a shame." Dale Cole felt his jaw tighten as he watched the scene unfold. In his years of philanthropy work, he'd witnessed many forms of human cruelty, but this public humiliation of a vulnerable woman struck him particularly hard. Something in her quiet dignity, even as she stood trembling before the crowd, resonated deeply with him. The auctioneer, Mr. Thompson, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Now, Mr. Grace, this isn't really appropriate." $5, called out a voice from the crowd, followed by scattered laughter. 10, another added, turning the moment into some sort of twisted entertainment. Dale moved forward through the crowd, his presence creating a ripple effect as people instinctively stepped aside. He reached the front just as tears began to slip down Lila's cheeks, though she remained eerily silent, head bowed in shame. $10,000! Dale's voice cut through the chaos, deep and firm. The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to the stranger in their midst. Harold Grace's mouth fell open, the cruel amusement on his face replaced by shock. "What did you say?" $10,000. Dale repeated, meeting Lila's eyes for the first time. They were a soft brown, filled with confusion and fear, but also a flicker of something else. Hope, perhaps, or recognition of safety being offered. "You can't be serious," the auctioneer stammered, but Dale was already pulling out his checkbook. "I am entirely serious." He wrote the check with steady hands, his signature flowing across the paper with practiced ease. "And with this payment, Miss Grace is free to make her own choices." He turned to Lila, his voice softening. "You're free now." The crowd began to disperse, murmuring among themselves about the strange turn of events. Harold Grace snatched the check from the auctioneer's hands and stumbled away, leaving his daughter standing alone on the platform. Dale approached carefully, removing his suit jacket as he noticed her shivering despite the warm evening. "May I?" he asked gently, holding out the jacket. Lila nodded almost imperceptibly, allowing him to drape the jacket over her shoulders. It engulfed her small frame, but she clutched it close, finding comfort in its warmth and the lingering scent of clean cologne. "I have a car, parked nearby," Dale said quietly, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. "I can take you wherever you need to go. You have my word that no harm will come to you." Lila looked up at him, tears still streaking her face, catching the light from the street lamps that had begun to flicker on as dusk deepened into night. After a long moment she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have nowhere to go." "Then let me help you find somewhere safe," Dale offered, gesturing toward his car, a black sedan parked at the edge of the square. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept help when it's offered." Lila glanced back at the town square, at the familiar faces that had watched her humiliation without intervention, at the only home she'd ever known that had become a prison of judgment and cruel whispers. Finally, she nodded, following Dale to his car. As they drove away from Green Hollow, the road winding toward the mountain passes, Lila remained silent, occasionally wiping away tears that continued to fall. The purr of the engine and the gentle whoosh of the air conditioning filled the quiet space between them. Dale didn't push for conversation, understanding that sometimes silence was the kindest gift you could offer someone who'd been through trauma. The town's lights faded behind them, replaced by the silver glow of a rising moon and the scattered diamonds of stars appearing in the darkening sky. The humid summer air gave way to cooler mountain breezes as they climbed higher into the rolling hills, leaving behind the scene of Layla's public shame and carrying her toward an uncertain but potentially brighter future. Dale kept his eyes on the winding road, but he was acutely aware of the woman beside him, wrapped in his jacket, carrying the weight of years of judgment and cruelty on her shoulders. He'd seen that same look of wounded dignity in others he'd helped through his foundation work. People who'd been beaten down by life, but somehow maintained a spark of resilience. Something about Lila Grace's quiet strength called to him, reminding him of his own journey through grief and loss. The mountain road stretched before them, each curve taking them further from Green Hollow and its suffocating small-town cruelty. Neither spoke as they drove into the gathering night, but the silence between them was filled with unspoken understanding and the first tentative threads of trust. Sunlight filtered through unfamiliar curtains, casting delicate patterns across Lila's face. She blinked slowly, her mind struggling to piece together where she was. The bed beneath her felt impossibly soft, nothing like her worn mattress back home. A gentle mountain breeze carried the mingled scents of coffee and pine through the slightly open window. For a moment, panic seized her chest as memories of the previous night flooded back. The auction, her father's cruel words, the stranger's intervention. She sat up quickly, her heart racing as she took in the spacious guest room with its cream-colored walls and handcrafted furniture. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Grace?" Dale Cole's steady voice came through the wood. "There's breakfast downstairs when you're ready. Take your time." She heard his footsteps retreat, giving her space to collect herself. On a chair near the bed, she found clean clothes laid out, simple jeans and a blue cotton blouse that looked close to her size. A note in elegant handwriting read, "These belonged to my sister. I hope they'll do for now. Helen Avery." After changing, Lila made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and something sweet baking. She found Dale in the kitchen, dressed casually in a flannel shirt and jeans, looking more approachable than he had in his business suit the night before. "Good morning," he said, setting down his coffee cup. "I hope you slept well." Yes, thank you," Lila managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't understand why I'm here." Dale's expression softened. "I brought you here for safety, Miss Grace. Nothing more. This isn't about ownership. That auction was wrong, and I couldn't stand by and watch it happen. But the money was worth it to help someone escape a bad situation." He finished firmly. "Please sit. Mrs. Avery has made breakfast." As if on cue, a woman in her 60s bustled into the kitchen, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "There you are, dear. I'm Helen Avery, the housekeeper here at Pine Ridge Ranch." She set a plate of warm cinnamon rolls on the table. "Eat up now. You're far too thin." Over breakfast, Dale explained his proposal. "My late wife Clara had a garden here, quite extensive actually. It's fallen into disrepair these past 5 years." He paused, something flickering behind his eyes. "If you'd like to stay, I can offer you room and board in exchange for working to restore it." I know something about gardens," Lila offered hesitantly. "I used to help at the church nursery." "Perfect." Dale nodded. "Would you like to see it?" After breakfast, Dale led her on a tour of the property. Pine Ridge Ranch sprawled across the mountainside, a masterpiece of natural beauty and thoughtful development. They passed paddocks where horses grazed peacefully, their coats gleaming in the morning sun. Fields of wildflowers stretched towards the horizon, painting the landscape in vibrant purples and yellows. "This is all yours?" Lila asked, amazed by the scope of it. "It's been in my family for generations," Dale explained, "though I've added some things over the years." They crested a small hill, and Lila gasped softly. A small chapel stood in a clearing, its white walls gleaming against the backdrop of pine trees. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows on the ground. "I built this after Clara passed," Dale said quietly. "She always wanted a place of worship up here." The garden lay behind the main house, once clearly a masterpiece of landscape design, now overtaken by weeds and untamed growth. But beneath the wilderness, Lila could see the bones of something beautiful. Rose bushes fought their way toward the sun, their few blooms defiant against the chaos. "It's still alive," she murmured, kneeling to touch a rose petal. "All of it. It just needs care." Dale watched her, something unreadable in his expression. "Then it's in good hands." Mrs. Avery provided Lila with gardening tools and gloves, and she spent the day slowly beginning to reclaim the garden from wilderness. Her hands trembled at times, still shaky from the emotional upheaval of the previous night, but the physical work helped ground her. As evening approached, Mrs. Avery brought her water and insisted she come in for dinner. "You've done enough for one day, dear. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was Clara's garden." Inside, Dale sat at the dining room table, old letters spread before him as he ate quietly. Layla noticed how his gaze occasionally drifted to the window where she had been working, though he quickly looked away when she caught him watching. After dinner, Lila found herself walking the grounds in the growing dusk. Dale had provided a lantern, its warm light creating a small circle of visibility in the gathering darkness. She made her way to the chapel, drawn to its peaceful presence. Inside, moonlight filtered through the stained glass, creating ethereal patterns on the simple wooden pews. Lila sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the events that had brought her here. "I know it's been a while," she whispered into the silence. "I'm not even sure if you're listening anymore, but thank you for sending help when I needed it most." Her voice broke slightly. "Even if I don't understand why." Later, as she prepared for bed, she found Dale in the hallway. "Mr. Cole," she called softly, "I wanted to thank you for everything." He turned, his face half in shadow. "Just helping someone who needed a way out," he said simply. Then, more gently, "Get some rest, Miss Grace. Tomorrow is another day." In her room, Lila stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit mountains. The scent of pine still lingered in the air, mixed now with the earthiness of the garden soil on her hands. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her heart. Not quite hope, but perhaps its distant cousin. Far above, stars scattered across the Colorado sky like diamonds on velvet, silent witnesses to the beginning of her new life at Pine Ridge Ranch. The morning sun painted the mountains in shades of gold as Lila made her way to the chicken coop. Her steps were hesitant at first. She'd never worked with farm animals before, but Mrs. Avery had shown her the ropes the previous evening. "Good morning, ladies," she called softly to the hens, who clucked and shuffled as she scattered their feed. The simple task brought an unexpected smile to her face. These creatures didn't care about her past or her failures. They just wanted their breakfast. After finishing with the chickens, Lila headed to the stables. The horses were intimidating with their massive size, but Mrs. Avery's steady presence made the work less daunting. "They can sense fear," Mrs. Avery explained, demonstrating how to brush a chestnut mare. "But they can also sense kindness. Just be gentle and confident." She handed Lila the brush, watching as she tentatively stroked the horse's neck. From his spot on the wraparound porch, Dale observed their interaction. He noticed how Lila's shoulders, usually hunched as if expecting a blow, gradually relaxed as she worked with the animals. Her movements became more assured, her smile appearing more frequently. The garden took up most of her time. She worked methodically, clearing away years of neglect, one section at a time. Sometimes she'd pause to examine a particular flower or herb, her fingers tracing the leaves with obvious fascination. During lunch on the second day, Dale found himself lingering at the kitchen table longer than usual. The conversation started simply enough. Comments about the unseasonably cool weather, the way the mountains changed color throughout the day. "The wildflowers here are amazing," Lila said softly, pushing her empty plate aside. "I've never seen such varieties. Back home we mostly had—" She trailed off, not wanting to think about her former life. "You enjoy flowers?" Dale asked, steering the conversation back to safer ground. A slight blush colored her cheeks. "I used to sketch them, actually. Nothing professional, just... it helped me feel peaceful." Dale's expression shifted slightly, something flickering behind his eyes. Without a word, he stood and left the room. Lila's heart sank, thinking she'd somehow offended him, but he returned moments later carrying a leather-bound book. "Clara, my wife. She liked to sketch too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Mostly the gardens, sometimes the mountains." He held out the book. "You might find it useful for reference." Lila took the sketchbook with trembling hands, understanding the weight of trust this represented. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll be very careful with it." The afternoon brought storm clouds rolling over the peaks. Lila worked quickly, trying to finish her tasks before the rain hit. She was pruning an overgrown rose bush when the first drops fell, and in her haste to gather her tools, the pruning shears slipped. Sharp pain shot through her palm. "Oh!" she gasped, watching blood well up from the cut. Dale appeared so quickly she wondered if he'd been watching from nearby. "Let me see," he said, his voice firm but gentle. He took her hand in his, examining the wound with careful fingers. "It's nothing," Lila protested weakly, but Dale was already leading her to the kitchen. He sat her down and retrieved a first aid kit, cleaning the cut with practiced efficiency. "Not too deep," he murmured, applying antiseptic. "But it needs attention." His hands were warm and steady as he wrapped the bandage. Lila found herself studying his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the slight grey at his temples, the concentrated focus in his eyes. When those eyes suddenly met hers, she felt heat rush to her face. For a moment, neither moved. Something electric seemed to crackle in the air between them, more intense than the approaching storm. Then Lila pulled her hand back, mumbling thanks as she hurried from the kitchen. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the windows. Lila retreated to her room, her bandaged hand pressed against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. She couldn't shake the memory of Dale's touch, so gentle it almost hurt more than the cut itself. Out on the porch, Dale stood watching the storm roll across the valley. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by soft rumbles of thunder. The rain created a curtain of silver, blurring the mountains into watercolor shapes. "You'd have liked her, Clara," he whispered into the gathering dusk. The words felt strange on his tongue. He hadn't spoken to his wife's memory in months. But something about Lila's presence in the garden, her careful handling of Clara's sketchbook, her quiet determination to heal what was broken, seemed to bridge the gap between past and present. Thunder rolled again, closer now, echoing through the valley like nature's reply. Dale stayed on the porch, letting the cool mist touch his face, watching as darkness settled over the ranch, and the rain continued to fall. Behind him, warm light spilled from the kitchen windows, and he could hear Mrs. Avery humming as she prepared dinner. Somewhere upstairs, Lila was probably looking through Clara's sketches, her injured hand carefully bandaged, unaware of how her presence was slowly changing the rhythm of this place that had been frozen in grief for so long. Another peal of thunder swept through the valley, gentler this time, like a lullaby sung by the mountains themselves. The morning sun crept over the mountain peaks, bringing with it a brisk wind that carried the scent of pine and wild sage. Lila stood in the garden, her boots covered in fresh soil, holding packets of flower seeds in her hands. The air was so clear up here, it made everything seem sharper, more vivid. She carefully created furrows in the rich earth, remembering Mrs. Avery's instructions about proper depth and spacing. As she dropped tiny seeds into the dark soil, a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, the first real smile she'd felt in longer than she could remember. Inside the house, Dale paced his office, phone pressed to his ear. "Jim, I understand the concerns, but my personal life isn't relevant to the community center project." "Dale, you brought a woman across state lines after buying her at an auction," his assistant said, voice crackling through the speaker. "The local papers are starting to ask questions. The optics look bad, and you know it." Dale's jaw tightened. She needed help, I provided it. End of story. Should we at least release a statement? Maybe have her return to— No. Dale cut him off firmly. She stays as long as she wants to. Handle the press however you need to, but that's not negotiable. He ended the call and stood at his window, watching Lila work in the garden below. After a simple lunch of sandwiches and fresh lemonade, Dale found Lila near the barn, watching the horses graze in the paddock. She didn't startle when he approached. She was getting used to his presence now. "They're beautiful," she said softly, resting her arms on the fence. "I've never been this close to horses before." Dale studied her profile, noting how the mountain air had brought color to her cheeks. "Would you like to learn to ride?" Lila turned to him, surprise evident in her eyes. "Oh, I don't know if I could." "Everyone starts somewhere," he said. "I have a gentle mare who'd be perfect for a beginner." She bit her lip, considering, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'd like that." Dale led her into the barn, showing her how to approach the horses, how to offer her hand palm up for them to sniff. He demonstrated proper grooming techniques and helped her saddle Maple, a calm chestnut mare with kind eyes. "Put your left foot in the stirrup," Dale instructed, standing close as Lila attempted to mount. "Push up with your right leg and swing it over." After a few awkward tries, Lila found herself seated in the saddle, gripping the reins tightly. "I'm so high up." She laughed nervously, the sound carrying across the paddock. Dale's lips curved into a smile, the first Lila had seen from him. "You're doing fine. Just relax your shoulders. Maple knows what she's doing." They spent the next hour walking slow circles in the paddock, Dale leading Maple on a lead rope, while Lila gradually grew more comfortable in the saddle. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Lila was feeling more confident. "That's enough for today," Dale said, helping her dismount. Her legs were shaky from the unfamiliar exercise, and she stumbled slightly as she landed. Dale's hands steadied her shoulders, the touch brief but warm. They led the horses back to the barn together, the sunset casting long shadows across the ground. As they finished putting away the tack, a truck pulled up to the house, Dr. Morgan, right on time for Dale's monthly checkup. The doctor was a friendly man in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. After examining Dale's old injury from a fall during ranch work years ago, he noticed Lila hovering nearby. "You must be the young lady Mrs. Avery mentioned," he said kindly. "How are you finding ranch life?" "It's different," Lila answered. "But good." Dr. Morgan's experienced eyes noted her pale complexion and the dark circles under her eyes. "Make sure you're eating enough iron-rich foods," he advised. "Ranch work can be demanding when you're not used to it. Lots of red meat and leafy greens should help." After the doctor left, Lila insisted on finishing her evening chores, despite Dale's suggestion that she rest. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky as she put away the last of the gardening tools in the shed. The world suddenly seemed to tilt sideways. Lila reached out, her hand finding the rough wooden wall of the shed. Her vision blurred, dark spots dancing at the edges. She tried to call out, but her voice wouldn't work. The last thing she saw was the rose bushes silhouetted against the star-filled sky as her knees buckled and darkness claimed her. She crumpled to the ground, unconscious, as the evening breeze stirred the petals of the newly pruned roses above her. Lila's eyelids fluttered open to find sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. She was back in her bed at the ranch, though she had no memory of getting there. Her head felt heavy, and her mouth was dry. As her vision cleared, she made out 3 worried faces hovering nearby: Dale, Mrs. Avery, and a man she recognized as Dr. Morgan from the previous evening. "Welcome back," Dr. Morgan said gently, moving closer to check her pulse. "You gave everyone quite a scare last night." Mrs. Avery dabbed at her eyes with her apron. "Mr. Cole found you passed out by the garden shed. Thank the Lord he was checking the property before turning in." Dale stood at the foot of the bed, his face etched with concern. He hadn't changed clothes since the previous night, and his usually neat hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. "I'm okay, I think," Lila answered, her voice scratchy. "Just embarrassed. I'm sorry to cause such trouble." "None of that now," Mrs. Avery scolded kindly, helping her sit up against the pillows. Dr. Morgan cleared his throat, drawing their attention. He held a sheet of paper in his hands, test results from the blood work he'd done when he arrived. The room grew still as he adjusted his glasses, studying the page with careful consideration. "Well," he began, looking up at Lila with a gentle smile. "I believe congratulations are in order, Miss Grace. You're pregnant." The words hung in the air like suspended dust motes. Lila stared at him, uncomprehending at first, then slowly shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible. There must be some mistake." "The tests are quite clear," Dr. Morgan replied kindly. "But I can't—" Lila's voice cracked. "The doctors in Green Hollow ran all sorts of tests. They said I could never— They were absolutely certain I was infertile." Dale had gone completely still, his hands gripping the footboard of the bed. His eyes held a look of wonder, tinged with something deeper, as if long-dormant faith was stirring in his soul. "Medicine isn't always absolute," Dr. Morgan explained. "Sometimes the human body surprises us, and sometimes—" he smiled warmly— "miracles happen." Mrs. Avery squeezed Lila's hand. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, dear." After answering their questions about prenatal care and scheduling a follow-up appointment, Dr. Morgan took his leave. Mrs. Avery bustled off to prepare some tea, leaving Dale and Lila alone in the sunlit room. Tears began rolling down Lila's cheeks. "This has to be some cruel mistake," she whispered. "How can I possibly? After all this time, why now?" Dale moved to sit in the chair beside her bed. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out and took her trembling hand in his. "Maybe it's not a mistake," he said quietly. "Maybe it's mercy." Lila looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. His eyes held a warmth she hadn't seen before, as if the news had melted something frozen inside him. The day passed in a haze. Mrs. Avery kept Lila in bed despite her protests, bringing up light meals and herbal tea. By evening, Lila felt strong enough to move downstairs. She found Dale in the living room, where he had built a fire against the evening chill. He looked up as she entered, immediately rising to help her to the comfortable armchair nearest the fireplace. They sat in companionable silence, watching the flames dance and listening to the logs pop and crackle. Dale's thoughts drifted to Clara, remembering how she'd loved sitting by this very fireplace, dreaming of the children they'd never had time to have. Now, watching Lila lost in her own thoughts, he felt a strange sense of rightness, as if some divine hand was gently turning the pages to a new chapter. Lila stared into the flames, one hand resting unconsciously on her stomach. Everything she'd believed about herself, every cruel word thrown at her about being broken or worthless, was being challenged by the tiny life growing inside her. "I don't understand why this is happening," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the fire's soft roar. Dale turned to look at her, his face softened by the firelight. "Sometimes miracles don't need reasons." Outside the window, the first snowflakes of an unseasonable storm began to fall, white against the darkening sky. They watched them drift past the window, each lost in their own thoughts about the changes this miracle would bring to their lives. Mrs. Avery appeared in the doorway with a fresh pot of tea, pausing to observe the peaceful scene before her. The fire cast a warm glow over them both. Dale, whose grief-hardened heart seemed to be thawing, and Lila, whose broken spirit was beginning to heal. As she watched, another snowflake spiraled past the window, a quiet herald of transformation. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. Lila stood at her window, watching the last of yesterday's unexpected snow melt away in the morning sun. Her hand drifted to her stomach, still flat, showing no sign of the miracle within. She dressed quickly, in work clothes, and headed downstairs, determination in every step. In the kitchen, Dale looked up from his coffee, frowning as he saw her heading for the garden tools. "You should rest today," he said, his voice gentle but firm. Lila shook her head. "I need to work. The garden. It helps me think. At least let me bring you some breakfast first." "I'll eat later," she promised, already moving toward the door. The morning air was crisp and clean. Lila knelt in the soft earth, letting the rich soil run through her fingers. The garden seemed different somehow, more alive, as if it too held secrets of new life. She began pulling weeds from around the recovering rose bushes, working steadily despite Dale's concerned glances from the porch. As she worked, she found herself talking softly, barely above a whisper. "I don't know if you're really there," she murmured, one hand touching her middle. "The doctors were so sure. I'm afraid to believe in you yet." The sun climbed higher, warming her shoulders as she moved between the flower beds. She planted new seeds in the freshly turned earth, each one a tiny act of faith. At noon, the screen door creaked. Dale appeared, carrying a tray with 2 bowls of steaming soup and thick slices of bread. Without a word, he settled beside her on the wooden garden bench. "Mrs. Avery's vegetable soup," he said, passing her a bowl. "She says you need to keep up your strength." Lila accepted it gratefully, realizing how hungry she'd grown. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching butterflies dance among the flowers. "Tell me about your wife," Lila said suddenly, surprising herself with her boldness. Dale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice soft with memory. "Clara loved this garden. She'd spend hours out here, talking to the plants like old friends." He smiled faintly. She believed everything deserved a chance to grow, no matter how unlikely it seemed. "What happened to her?" "Cancer, 5 years ago." His hands tightened around his bowl. "It happened so fast. One day she was planting spring bulbs, the next—" He trailed off, looking into the distance. Lila touched his arm gently. "I'm sorry." Dale nodded, then turned to her. "What about you? Will you tell me about home?" Lila's fingers twisted in her lap. "There's not much to tell. After the doctors said I couldn't have children, everything changed. My husband left. My family." She swallowed hard. "They said I was being punished for something, that I wasn't worthy of God's blessing." "That's not true," Dale said firmly. "I stopped going to church, stopped praying. What was the point?" She blinked back tears. "But sometimes, late at night, I'd still catch myself talking to God, asking why." "I did that too," Dale admitted. "After Clara died, I was angry at God. I built that chapel, but I couldn't step inside it. Then one day I found myself praying again, not for answers, just for something worth believing in." Lila looked at him thoughtfully. "And did you find it?" His eyes met hers, then dropped to where her hand rested protectively over her stomach. "Maybe I did." A shadow crossed her face. "My family might come looking for me. My father, he won't like that I ran away." "You're safe here," Dale said, his voice taking on a protective edge. No one will hurt you again, I promise." That evening, Mrs. Avery invited Lila to help her sort through old photographs. They sat at the kitchen table while Dale worked in his study, spreading out faded pictures and memories. "This was Clara," Mrs. Avery said, passing Lila a photograph of a smiling woman with kind eyes standing among the roses. "She would have liked you." "She was beautiful," Lila murmured. "She was special." Mrs. Avery hesitated, then continued. "She couldn't have children either. The doctors told her it was impossible. It broke her heart, but she never lost her kindness." Lila stared at the photograph, feeling a strange connection to this woman she'd never met. "Did she ever?" She couldn't finish the question. "No," Mrs. Avery said softly. "She got sick before they could try anything else. But she never stopped believing in miracles." She patted Lila's hand. "Maybe she sent one your way." Later that night, Dale stood at his study window, watching as Lila moved through the garden with a lantern, lighting small candles among the flowers, an old tradition Mrs. Avery had told her about. The tiny flames flickered like earthbound stars, bringing warmth to the growing darkness. He realized suddenly how long it had been since the house had felt truly alive. Since Clara's death, it had been like a museum of memories, preserved but lifeless. Now, watching Lila tend to both garden and candles, he felt something shift inside him, as if spring had finally returned after a long winter. In the garden, Lila knelt beside the roses, their petals glowing in the candlelight. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was thanking. God, Clara's memory, or the tiny spark of life inside her that defied all medical certainty. Inside his study, Dale watched the candlelight dance across the garden. "Thank you," he murmured, his prayer one of gratitude for the unexpected gift of renewal. The candles burned steadily in the gentle night breeze, their light a testament to hope rekindled and faith reborn. Lila stayed in the garden until the last candle flickered out, letting peace settle over her like a familiar blanket. Tomorrow would bring its own questions and doubts, but for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to believe in miracles. 3 days passed in gentle routine at the mountain ranch. The garden flourished under Lila's care, and even Dale noticed how the roses seemed to stand taller, their blooms more vibrant than they'd been in years. The peace shattered on a crisp morning when the security system chimed, alerting them to visitors at the front gate. Dale stood at his office window, coffee cup halfway to his lips, and frowned at the sleek news van pulling up to the entrance. A woman in a sharp blazer stepped out, followed by a man lugging camera equipment. Mrs. Avery hurried into the office. "Mr. Cole, there are reporters." "I see them." Dale's voice was tight. He set down his coffee and straightened his shoulders. "Make sure Lila stays inside." The reporter's heels clicked against the gravel as Dale strode out to meet them at the gate. Her practiced smile didn't waver as she extended her hand. "Mr. Cole, Jessica Martinez from Channel 8 News. We'd love to get your comment on—" "This is private property," Dale cut in, his tone ice cold. "You weren't invited here." The cameraman raised his equipment, but Dale stepped deliberately in front of the lens. Jessica pressed on. "Our viewers are fascinated by your story, Mr. Cole. The billionaire philanthropist and his miracle girl. It's capturing hearts across—" "Turn that camera off." Dale's voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "Now. Is it true she was sold at auction? And now she's carrying a miracle baby that doctors said was impossible?" Jessica's smile turned knowing. "Our sources in Green Hollow. Get off my property." Each word fell like a hammer. "Or I'll have you escorted off. The public has questions, Mr. Cole, about your relationship, about the timing of this pregnancy." Dale stepped closer, his height imposing. The only relationship here is between me and my lawyers, who will be very interested in your harassment and trespassing. Leave. Now." Inside the house, Lila watched through a window, her hands trembling. Mrs. Avery stood beside her, a comforting hand on her shoulder. They watched the news van retreat down the long driveway, Dale's rigid posture not relaxing until they were gone. But the damage was done. Within hours, the story exploded online. Dale's phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Headlines screamed across social media. "Billionaire's mountain mystery, infertile woman, pregnant by philanthropist Cole," and "Miracle or Scandal, the truth behind Cole Ranch romance." Lila fled to her room, overwhelmed by the sudden invasion of her privacy. She curled up in the window seat, watching snowflakes begin to drift past the glass, and tried to steady her breathing. The baby shifted inside her, as if sensing her distress. Dale's charity board called an emergency meeting via video conference. He paced his office as they voiced their concerns about the organization's image, about donor perception, about the optics of the situation. "This could damage everything we've built." One board member warned, "We need to get ahead of this story." "There is no story," Dale said firmly, "and I won't exploit a vulnerable woman to satisfy public curiosity." "Dale." Another member spoke gently. "Perhaps if we released a simple statement explaining—" "No statements, no explanations. This isn't up for discussion." Hum ended the call, rubbing his temples. Evening settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket. Dale knocked softly on Lila's door, carrying a tray with tea and soup. "May I come in?" She sat cross-legged on the bed, looking small and lost. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've caused so much trouble." Dale set the tray down and sat beside her. "You haven't caused anything. I'm the one who should apologize. I never meant to drag you into this circus." "What if they're right?" Her voice cracked. "What if I'm just being used again? Not by you, but by life or fate or—" She trailed off, wiping her eyes. "Look at me," Dale said quietly. When she met his gaze, he continued, "I will protect your name and your privacy at any cost. You're not a story or a scandal. You're a person who deserves peace and dignity." Lila nodded, trying to believe him. "I just don't understand why people can't leave us alone." "Because they've forgotten how to respect miracles," he said simply. "They'd rather turn them into entertainment." Mrs. Avery convinced them both to come down for dinner, insisting they needed proper food and warmth. They sat at the kitchen table while she served homemade stew, the atmosphere gradually softening as they ate. Suddenly, Lila gasped, her spoon clattering against her bowl. Her hand flew to her stomach, eyes wide with wonder and fear. "What's wrong?" Dale was instantly alert, half rising from his chair. "The baby," she breathed. It kicked." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she felt it again, stronger this time. Dale stood frozen, unable to find words. This moment made it all real in a way nothing else had. Not the test results, not the morning sickness, not even the gentle curve of her growing belly. There was a living child, moving and strong, despite every doctor who'd said it was impossible. Without thinking, he knelt beside her chair. Lila took his hand and placed it where the baby kicked again. The touch was like a jolt of electricity through both of them. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. Lila's free hand covered his where it rested on her stomach. Through the kitchen window, they could see snow beginning to fall in earnest now, big flakes dancing in the porch light. The world outside might buzz with speculation and judgment, but here in this moment, there was only wonder and a fragile, growing hope. They stayed like that, connected by the miracle beneath their joined hands, while Mrs. Avery quietly wiped her own tears and pretended to be very busy with the dishes. The baby kicked again, as if saying hello, and Lila's laugh was both joyful and frightened. "I never thought I'd feel this," she whispered. "I'd given up hoping." Dale squeezed her hand gently. "Sometimes hope finds us anyway." The snow fell steadily outside, wrapping the ranch in hushed white peace, while inside, two hearts beat in time with a third, smaller one that defied all odds to exist. Morning light filtered through the frost-covered windows of Dale's study, where a team of lawyers in crisp suits had assembled around his massive oak desk. Papers rustled as they reviewed drafted statements, their faces tight with professional concern. "Mr. Cole," began the lead attorney, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "we've prepared several options for public response. The most strategic approach would be to establish clear separation between yourself and Miss Grace." Dale stood at the window, watching snow melt from the branches. His reflection showed the tension in his jaw. "Explain what you mean by separation." Morgan Hill, his assistant, stepped forward with a tablet in hand. "We suggest announcing that Miss Grace's temporary residence here was purely charitable. We distance the Foundation from any personal involvement and emphasize this was a one-time humanitarian gesture." "And Lila?" Dale turned, his voice deceptively calm. "What happens to her in this scenario?" Another lawyer cleared his throat. "We could arrange alternative accommodations, perhaps a private facility." "No." The word fell like a stone in still water. Morgan's heels clicked on the hardwood as she approached Dale. "Be reasonable. The Foundation's reputation is at stake. Donors are already expressing concerns about scandal. Your work with underprivileged communities could suffer. The Foundation exists to help people in need." Dale said. "Lila needed help. How does abandoning her now serve our mission?" "This is different," Morgan insisted. "The public perception, then it's not a Foundation worth saving." Dale's voice carried the quiet authority that had built his empire. "If we can't stand behind one vulnerable woman, then every charitable act we've ever done is just for show." In the hallway outside, Lila stood frozen, one hand pressed against the wall for support, the other cradling her belly. She'd come to bring Dale his morning coffee, a small gesture of gratitude that had become habit. Now each word struck her heart like tiny arrows. Morgan's voice rose with frustration. "You're risking everything you've built, years of work, millions in donations, thousands of people helped, all because of one woman?" "No," Dale replied. "Because of what's right." He walked to the door, effectively ending the discussion. "If anyone wants to resign over this, I'll accept with no hard feelings, but I won't abandon someone who needs protection just to please donors." The lawyers gathered their papers, exchanging glances. Morgan remained behind as others filed out, her face flushed with emotion. "Dale, please, think about Clara. What would she say about all this?" Dale's expression softened slightly. "Clara would have opened our home to Lila without hesitation. You knew her, Morgan. You know I'm right." Lila slipped away before the door opened, hurrying through the house with tears blurring her vision. The baby kicked, as if trying to comfort her. She found herself in the garden, among the sleeping roses she'd tended, where fresh snow blanketed everything in pristine white. The storm returned that evening, wind howling through the mountain passes like a wild thing. Layla couldn't rest, her mind churning with guilt and gratitude. Around midnight, she wrapped herself in a warm shawl and made her way to the small chapel Dale had built in memory of Clara. The chapel stood apart from the main house, its wooden walls glowing softly in the storm. Inside, the air held the sweet scent of pine and beeswax. Lila struck a match with trembling fingers, lighting a single candle on the altar. Its flame danced in the darkness, casting shadows on the simple cross above. "I don't know how to pray anymore," she whispered to the empty chapel. "But I know I can't stay and destroy everything he's built." "You're not destroying anything." Dale's voice came from the doorway, making her start. "You're bringing it back to life." He stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. The wind rattled the windows as he moved to stand beside her at the altar. "I heard what they said," Lila admitted. "What Morgan said. They're right. I'm nothing but trouble for you." "No." Dale's voice was firm but gentle. "You're a reminder of why I started the foundation in the first place. To help people. Real people, not just statistics for donors." Lila turned to face him, candlelight flickering across her features. "I want to leave before I ruin your life. You've done so much already, more than I can ever repay, but I can't bear to be the reason your work suffers." "You've saved mine." The words seemed to surprise even Dale. He stared at the candle flame, gathering thoughts he'd kept buried. "After Clara died, I stopped living, just went through the motions. Built this chapel, threw myself into charity work, but inside I was frozen. Grieving, yes, but also hiding, using her memory as an excuse not to feel anything real again." Tears slipped down Lila's cheeks as she listened. The baby moved within her, a gentle reminder of life's persistence. "Then you arrived," Dale continued softly. "And suddenly the house felt warm again. The garden started blooming. Even this chapel, I built it for Clara, but you're the first person I've ever seen pray here." "I'm not really praying," Lila whispered. "Just hoping." "Maybe that's the same thing." A particularly strong gust rattled the chapel, making the candle flame dance wildly. Without thinking, they moved closer together, as if seeking shelter from more than just the storm. "I don't want to leave," Lila admitted, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Then don't." Dale opened his arms slowly, giving her time to step away if she chose. Instead, Lila moved into his embrace. It wasn't passionate or romantic. It was something deeper, more fundamental. Two souls recognizing their shared humanity, their mutual need for connection and understanding. Dale's arms wrapped around her carefully, mindful of her condition, while Lila rested her head against his chest. They stood like that as the storm raged outside, finding peace in the simple act of holding and being held. The candle burned steadily now, protected from the draft by their bodies. Through the chapel's windows, the first hints of dawn began to appear. The storm that had howled all night gradually softened to gentle snowfall, then ceased altogether. As morning light spread across the mountains, it painted the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold. Inside the chapel, Dale and Lila remained in their embrace, neither willing to break the spell of understanding that had settled over them. The baby kicked once, softly, as if adding its own blessing to the moment. Morning sunlight filtered through dusty windows in the attic, as Mrs. Avery searched through old boxes. She'd come up looking for extra blankets, knowing the mountain nights were getting colder. Instead, she found something far more precious. "Oh my," she whispered, lifting a wooden box carved with delicate roses. She recognized it immediately, Clara's writing box, thought lost in the move after her passing. Dust coated its surface, but the wood still held a warm glow beneath. Mrs. Avery carried it downstairs carefully, like a fragile bird. She found Dale in his study, reviewing foundation papers. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "I think you should see this." Dale looked up, his eyes widening at the familiar box. "Where did you—" "The attic, hidden behind some old trunks." She set it gently on his desk. "It's Clara's letters." Dale's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside, dozens of envelopes lay bundled with faded ribbon, each marked with Clara's flowing script. Some were letters she'd received, others she'd written but never sent. At the bottom lay a cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax and marked simply, "For Dale, to be opened when you're ready to live again." Mrs. Avery quietly left the room as Dale held the envelope, his throat tight. He waited until late that night to read it, after the house had gone silent and only moonlight lit his study. The seal broke with a soft crack. Inside were 2 papers, one addressed to him, another sealed envelope behind it marked, "For the woman who will heal you." Dale unfolded Clara's letter with careful fingers. "My dearest Dale, if you're reading this, it means you've finally found someone worth opening your heart to again. I've known this day would come, even if you couldn't imagine it while I was sick. Before you read further, know this: I love you completely, and that love wants your happiness more than your grief. You've carried my memory like a shield, but it was never meant to be armor against living. Remember the women's charity we supported in Green Hollow? God placed it on my heart for a reason. There was a young woman there. She probably doesn't even remember meeting me, but her spirit touched me deeply. She had such gentleness, such hidden strength. I knew then that somehow, someday your paths would cross. The enclosed letter is for her. I wrote it not knowing her name, but knowing her heart would match yours. Give it to her when you're ready. All my love, Clara." Dale's vision blurred as he remembered Clara mentioning that charity visit years ago. She'd come home quiet, thoughtful, saying only that she'd met someone special. The next morning, Dale waited until Lila had settled at the breakfast table before placing both letters before her. "There's something you need to see," he said softly. Lila looked confused, but opened Clara's first letter. As she read, her hand went to her mouth. I remember her," she whispered. "She visited the shelter when I was there. She sat with me for hours, just listening. I never knew her name, but she gave me hope when I had none." With trembling fingers, she opened the second letter. "Dear friend, you don't know me, but I know your heart. I know because it matches Dale's, gentle but strong, wounded but healing. You've probably wondered why your paths crossed, how you ended up here. It wasn't chance. Love him well. He'll try to protect you from his grief, but show him it's safe to feel again. Your presence in his life isn't a betrayal of my memory, it's an answer to my prayers. And know this: you are worthy of love, worthy of joy, worthy of miracles. Never let anyone tell you different. With love and blessing, Clara Cole." Tears fell freely now, dropping onto the paper. Dale reached across the table, taking Lila's hand. They sat in silence, letting the weight of divine orchestration settle over them. Later that afternoon, they found themselves in the garden. The air held autumn's crispness, but the sun warmed their backs as they worked side by side, planting late-season roses. "These will bloom in spring," Dale explained, showing Lila how to spread the roots gently in the soil. Clara loved the yellow ones best. "They'll be beautiful," Lila said softly. As she worked, she began humming an old hymn, "Great is thy faithfulness." The melody floated on the mountain air, peaceful and sure. To her surprise, Dale's deep voice joined in quietly on the chorus. Their voices blended in the ancient words of trust and providence. For a moment, everything felt right with the world. Then Lila gasped, doubling over. Sharp pain shot through her abdomen. "Something's wrong," she whispered, clutching her belly. Dale was at her side instantly, helping her stand. "I'm calling Dr. Matthews right now." The next hours passed in a blur of worry. The doctor arrived quickly, his face grave as he examined Lila. Finally, he pulled Dale aside in the hallway. "The pregnancy is at risk," he said quietly. "Her blood pressure is too high, and there are signs of early labor. She needs complete bed rest, no gardening, no physical activity at all. The next 48 hours are critical. Dale's jaw tightened. What are her chances? If she rests completely, good. But any stress could trigger complications. She needs peace and quiet. After the doctor left, Dale sat beside Lila's bed. She lay still, one hand resting protectively over her belly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have been more careful." "Shh," Dale soothed. "Just rest now. That's all that matters." The night deepened around them. From her bed, Lila could see the chapel through her window, its cross silvered by moonlight. Her lips moved in silent prayer. In his study, Dale knelt for the first time since Clara died, his heart raw with fear and hope. "Please," he whispered to the quiet room, "please let them both be all right." Outside, the mountain night held its breath, waiting. Dawn crept over the mountains with leaden skies, bringing a bone-deep chill that matched the heavy silence inside the ranch house. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away the slow morning hours as Dale sat motionless beside Lila's bed, watching her restless sleep. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He hadn't left her side all night. Lila's face was pale against the white pillowcase, her brow furrowing occasionally as she shifted in discomfort. One hand stayed protectively curved over her belly, even in sleep. Dale watched that hand, remembering another bedside vigil, another precious life slipping away despite his desperate prayers. The same fear that had gripped him during Clara's final days now wrapped icy fingers around his heart. He'd sworn to protect Lila, but instead she lay here, her pregnancy at risk. The media circus he'd brought to her doorstep, the stress of their growing connection, it was all his fault. Mrs. Avery entered quietly with fresh water and tea. She studied Dale's rigid posture, the distance already growing in his eyes. "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely, keeping her voice low to avoid waking Lila. "Don't you dare shut down again." "I'm not," Dale replied, but his voice was hollow. "I watched you do this with Clara," Mrs. Avery pressed, pulling away when she needed you most, thinking you were being strong. "That's not strength, Dale Cole. That's fear wearing a brave mask." "This is different," he said, still not looking at her. "Clara was already dying. Lila and her baby still have a chance if I remove the source of their stress." "And you think you're the source?" Mrs. Avery shook her head sadly. "The only stress that girl feels is worrying she's not good enough, that she doesn't deserve happiness. Are you going to prove her right?" But Dale had already retreated behind his walls of guilt and self-protection. Mrs. Avery recognized the set of his jaw, the distant look that meant his mind was made up. She'd seen it too many times during Clara's illness. "History doesn't have to repeat itself," she said softly, touching his shoulder. "You have a chance to choose differently this time." Dale didn't respond. Mrs. Avery sighed and left the room, her heart heavy with knowing what was coming. The grey day dragged on. Around evening, Lila's eyes finally fluttered open. She found Dale still sitting beside her, but something had changed. The warmth was gone from his face, replaced by a carefully blank expression she hadn't seen since her first days at the ranch. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice professionally concerned but distant. "Better," Lila said carefully, trying to read his mood. "The rest helped. I think tomorrow I could—" "You need to leave," Dale cut in, the words falling between them like stones. Lila stared at him, sure she'd misheard. "What?" "It's not safe for you here anymore." He stood, moving away from the bed. "The media attention, the stress, it's putting you and the baby at risk. I've arranged for a private apartment in Denver. You'll have the best medical care, complete privacy, and a generous allowance." "Dale, please." Lila struggled to sit up, her heart pounding. "Don't do this. Don't push me away." "I'm not pushing you away. I'm protecting you. His voice was maddeningly calm, reasonable. "The doctor said stress could kill your baby. I'm removing the stress." "You're not stress to me." Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks. "Your safety, your hope. Please, after everything, Clara's letters, the connection we've found, perhaps I read too much into coincidence?" Dale said coldly, "This arrangement was always meant to be temporary. It's time to end it before anyone else gets hurt." Lila felt the words like physical blows. She searched his face for any crack in the mask, any sign of the man who'd held her hand just yesterday as they planted roses. But there was nothing. He'd vanished behind walls she couldn't breach. "If that's what you want," she whispered finally, her voice breaking. "The car will be ready at 9 tomorrow morning," Dale said, already moving towards the door. "Mrs. Avery will help you pack." He left without looking back. Lila curled into herself, one hand pressed to her mouth to hold back sobs that might bring him running back, not out of love, but duty. She'd rather have his absence than his pity. True to his word, a sleek black car waited in the driveway the next morning. Lila stood in the weak sunlight, a small suitcase at her feet. She wore the same faded dress she'd arrived in, though Mrs. Avery had tried to press newer clothes on her. But Lila refused to take anything more than she'd brought. Dale wasn't there to say goodbye. Mrs. Avery hugged her fiercely, whispering, "He's being a fool. Give him time to realize it." But Lila shook her head. "Promise me something. Take care of him. And the roses we planted, when they bloom in spring, tell him." She stopped, swallowing hard. "Just take care of him." "God be with you, child," Mrs. Avery said softly, touching Lila's cheek. Lila climbed into the car without looking back at the house. As they drove away, she pressed her forehead to the cool window, watching the mountains fade into the distance. "I won't come back," she whispered, a promise to herself and the child within her. "We'll find our own way." The days that followed passed in a blur of headlines. Dale's assistant handled damage control, but the tabloids were merciless. "Billionaire abandons pregnant charity case" splashed across every newsstand. Cole Foundation heir cuts ties with miracle mother. Green hollow woman left in cold. Dale saw none of it. He retreated into isolation, speaking only when business required it. The ranch grew silent again, the warmth and life Lila had brought fading like a dream. One evening, exactly a week after she'd left, Dale sat alone at the massive dining room table. Snow fell endlessly outside the windows, thick flakes swirling in the darkness. His gaze fixed on Lila's empty chair, remembering how she'd sat there just days ago, her quiet laugh filling the room as Mrs. Avery told stories about Dale's childhood mishaps with horses. The table seemed to stretch endlessly now, a wooden sea of solitude. His plate sat untouched, food growing cold. In the kitchen, Mrs. Avery clattered dishes with pointed aggression, her disapproval loud in every bang of pots and pans. But Dale sat motionless, locked in his self-imposed prison of protection and fear, as the snow fell and fell and fell. 3 weeks crawled by like molasses in winter. Dale threw himself into foundation work with desperate intensity, starting before dawn and working late into the night. The endless meetings and phone calls couldn't drown out the silence of the ranch, but they helped numb the ache. His assistant placed a fresh stack of newspapers on his desk each morning. He ignored them all, knowing the headlines would only twist the knife deeper. But he couldn't escape the whispers that followed him through charity events and board meetings. His reputation was in tatters. Major donors were pulling out. The foundation's future hung by a thread. Dale didn't care. Every night he'd stand at his office window, staring at the garden where the rose bushes waited dormant under snow. Sometimes he thought he saw Lila there, kneeling in the dirt with her quiet smile. But it was only shadows playing tricks in the moonlight. Mrs. Avery maintained a chilly politeness, serving his meals with pressed lips and disapproving eyes. She'd stopped trying to engage him in conversation after the first week, when he'd snapped at her gentle suggestion that he call Lila just to check on her. Now she moved through the house like a ghost, dusting furniture and straightening rooms that no one used anymore. On this particular night, sleep eluded Dale completely. He paced his study at 3 a.m, watching snow spiral past the windows. The storm that had been threatening all day had finally arrived, bringing fierce winds that rattled the glass. Almost without conscious thought, he found himself pulling Clara's letter from his desk drawer. The paper had grown soft at the creases from repeated handling. He'd read it so many times he knew the words by heart, but something drew him back again and again, like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. "My dearest Dale." Clara's familiar handwriting flowed across the page. "If you're reading this, then the miracle I've been praying for has finally arrived. You found someone who makes you feel again, and it terrifies you. I know you too well, my love. You're already building those walls, aren't you? Turning grief into armor, convinced that loving again somehow betrays my memory." Dale's hands trembled. He sank into his leather chair, the words blurring before his eyes. "Listen carefully, because this might be the most important thing I ever tell you. Grief that makes you build walls isn't protection. It's prison. And love, real love, will tear those walls down every time. When the next miracle comes, and it will come, Dale, don't run from it. Don't let fear of loss keep you from living. That would be the only way to truly betray what we had." A sound caught in his throat. Not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Clara had always seen right through him, even from beyond the grave. "The woman reading this now," the letter continued, "whoever she is, she's not a replacement for me. She's her own miracle, with her own purpose in your life. Don't compare her to my memory. Don't measure her against what was. Just open your heart and—" The study door burst open with a bang. Mrs. Avery stood in the doorway, still in her nightgown, her face pale with urgency. "It's the hospital in Meadow Creek," she said, thrusting the phone at him. "Lila's in labor, too early. They're saying there are complications." The world tilted sideways. Dale grabbed the phone, his heart thundering in his chest. A harried nurse's voice crackled through the speaker. "Mr. Cole, Miss Grace asked us not to call you, but she's been in labor for 6 hours. The baby's in distress. We don't have the facilities here for premature delivery. The nearest capable hospital is in Denver, but the roads—" Dale was already moving, grabbing his coat from the rack. "How far along is she?" 32 weeks. Sir, the storm— I'm coming. Tell her I'm coming." He hung up, shoving the phone in his pocket. Mrs. Avery already held his keys and wallet. "The 4-wheel drive is gassed up," she said. "Drive careful. That storm's turning into a blizzard." Dale paused at the door, looking at his housekeeper's worried face. "Helen, pray for them." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Already am." The bitter cold hit him like a physical blow as he stepped outside. Snow whipped sideways, the wind howling through the mountains like a living thing. The headlights of his SUV cut twin paths through the swirling white as he navigated down the long driveway. 3 hours to Meadow Creek, if the roads were clear. But they wouldn't be. Not in this storm. "Please," he whispered, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. "Please, God, don't take them both." The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't prayed since Clara died. But they kept coming, desperate and raw, as he guided the vehicle through the worsening storm. "I know I have no right to ask. I know I pushed away the miracle you sent. But please, please don't punish them for my mistakes. Lila deserves better. That baby deserves a chance." His headlights caught the reflective signs marking the mountain highway. The snow was getting thicker, reducing visibility to mere feet. Any sane person would turn back. But Dale pressed on, leaning forward as if he could physically push the car to go faster. "I'll do better," he promised to the howling night. "I'll tear down every wall. Just let me get to them in time. Let me make this right." The SUV crept through the blinding snow, each mile a battle against nature itself. But Dale didn't hesitate, didn't slow. Somewhere ahead in the storm, Lila needed him. And this time, he wouldn't let fear keep him from being there. Clara's words echoed in his mind. "When the next miracle comes, don't run." "I'm done running," he whispered and pressed the accelerator harder. The storm had turned the 40-minute drive into a 3-hour battle against nature. Dale's SUV finally crawled into the small parking lot of Meadow Creek Medical Clinic just before midnight. The headlights illuminated swirling sheets of snow before he cut the engine, his hands shaking from gripping the steering wheel so tightly. The clinic was a modest 2-story building, its windows glowing warm against the darkness. Dale burst through the front doors, tracking snow across the linoleum floor. His coat was covered in white, his face red from the bitter cold. "Lila Grace," he said to the startled receptionist. "She's in labor." Before she could answer, a nurse hurried out from behind the desk. "Mr. Cole, this way, quickly." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they rushed down a narrow hallway. Dale's heart pounded with each step. The nurse pushed open a door, and there she was. Lila lay in the hospital bed, her dark hair damp with sweat, her face pale as the sheets beneath her. An IV drip stood sentinel beside her, and monitors beeped steadily, tracking 2 heartbeats. When she saw him, her eyes widened. "Dale." Her voice was barely a whisper. He crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her small hand in both of his. "I'm here. I'm so sorry, Layla. I'm here now." A contraction gripped her, and she squeezed his hand hard, her face contorting in pain. Dale held on, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her skin until it passed. The doctor appeared beside them, his expression grave. "Mr. Cole, I'm Dr. Matthews. We need to talk about the situation." Dale nodded, but didn't let go of Lila's hand. "She's only 32 weeks along," the doctor explained quietly. "The baby is in distress, and Lila's blood pressure is concerning. We're not equipped here for complicated premature deliveries. The nearest NICU is in Denver, but in this storm, what are our options?" Dale's voice was steady, but fear churned in his gut. "We have to deliver here. There's no choice now. But you should understand the risks." Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Lila cried out, and Dale turned back to her immediately, all his attention focused on her face. "Breathe with me," he said softly. "That's it, just like that." When it passed, Lila's eyes were filled with tears. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know, but you're the strongest person I've ever met, remember? You and this baby, you're fighters." She managed a weak smile. "Why did you come?" "Because I was wrong. So wrong." Dale's voice cracked. "I thought I was protecting you by sending you away. But I was only protecting my fear. I've spent 5 years hiding behind grief, convincing myself that caring for someone meant losing them." Lila's fingers tightened around his. "I forgive you," she said softly. The simple words undid him. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he pressed his forehead to their joined hands. "I don't deserve it. Love isn't about deserving," she whispered. Then her body tensed with another contraction. The next hours blurred together in a rhythm of pain and breathing, whispered encouragement and quiet prayers. Dale never left her side, supporting her through each wave of contractions. He wiped her brow, fed her ice chips, and held her when the pain became almost unbearable. The storm raged outside, but inside that small room, time seemed to stand still. The monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious heartbeat. Nurses came and went, checking vital signs and adjusting medications. As midnight gave way to the early hours, Lila grew weaker. The doctor's concerned glances became more frequent. Dale felt helpless, able only to hold her hand and whisper words of comfort. "Tell me about the garden," Lila asked between contractions, her voice thin with exhaustion. Dale smiled, playing along. "The roses you planted are starting to bud. And those wildflower seeds you scattered? They're coming up everywhere. Mrs. Avery says you've brought the whole place back to life." Like Clara's letter said. "Yes." Dale squeezed her hand. She knew. Somehow she knew you'd come and make everything bloom again. A particularly strong contraction gripped her then, and the monitors began to beep more urgently. The doctor rushed in, checking readings and examining Lila quickly. "It's time," he announced. "Lila, on the next contraction, I need you to push." What followed was the hardest battle Dale had ever witnessed. Lila pushed with strength he hadn't known she possessed, her small body fighting to bring new life into the world. He supported her back, whispered encouragement, and prayed more fervently than he had in years. Finally, just as the faintest hint of dawn began to lighten the window, a new sound filled the room. The thin, angry cry of a newborn taking her first breath. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, his tired face breaking into a smile. Lila collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief and joy. Dale kissed her forehead, his own tears falling freely. "She made it," he whispered. "You both did." The nurses quickly cleaned and wrapped the tiny baby, placing her on Lila's chest. Though small, her cry was strong, her tiny face scrunched up in protest at the bright world. Dale watched in wonder as Lila counted fingers and toes, traced the delicate curve of their daughter's nose. When the baby's hand escaped the blanket, her tiny fingers wrapped instinctively around Dale's thumb. The touch was like an electric current straight to his heart. This was real. This was miracle. Through the window, the storm had finally passed. The first rays of sunrise painted the snow-covered mountains in shades of pink and gold, a new day dawning for all of them. Morning sunlight streamed through the clinic window, casting a gentle glow across the small room. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a pristine blanket of fresh snow that sparkled like diamonds under the clear Colorado sky. In a worn hospital chair, Dale Cole sat cradling his newborn daughter, marveling at how something so tiny could feel so significant. The baby slept peacefully in his arms, her small face relaxed in complete trust. Her tiny fingers, no bigger than matchsticks, curled against the soft blanket the nurses had wrapped her in. With each tiny breath she took, Dale felt decades of grief and loneliness melting away, replaced by a peace he hadn't experienced since before Clara's illness. "You're a miracle," he whispered to the sleeping infant. "Your mama's a miracle too." On the bed, Lila stirred slightly. She'd been sleeping for several hours after the exhausting delivery, her face peaceful despite the ordeal she'd been through. Dale watched her with tender concern, noting how the morning light softened the worry lines that had marked her face these past months. The baby made a small sound, drawing his attention back. Her eyes fluttered open, deep blue, like all newborns, and she gazed up at him with an expression that seemed impossibly wise for one so new to the world. Dale felt tears prick his eyes again. "Good morning," came Lila's soft voice from the bed. Dale looked up to find her watching them, her eyes bright with joy despite her exhaustion. "Good morning," he replied, voice rough with emotion. "Would you like to hold her?" Lila nodded, carefully adjusting herself to sit up straighter. Dale stood and gently transferred their daughter to her arms, making sure to support the baby's head just as the nurses had shown him. She's perfect, Lila whispered, tracing one finger along the baby's cheek. I still can't believe she's real. Dale sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping one arm around Lila's shoulders. She's real. You're both real. And you're both incredible. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their daughter sleep. The morning sun continued its slow journey across the room, warming them in its glow. Outside, birds began their morning songs, and the sounds of the clinic starting its day filtered in faintly through the door. We should give her a name, Lila said finally, looking up at Dale. I've been thinking. So have I, Dale admitted. He squeezed her shoulder gently. What are your thoughts? Grace, Lila said softly. Because that's what she is, pure grace, a gift we never expected. Dale's heart swelled. Grace, he repeated, testing the name. It's perfect, and I was wondering if we might add Clara as her middle name. Lila's eyes filled with tears as she smiled. Grace Clara Cole. Yes, that feels right, doesn't it? Honoring both the miracle and the woman who somehow knew to bring us together. Dale pressed a kiss to Lila's temple, his own eyes wet. Clara would have loved you both so much. A nurse came in to check Lila's vitals and the baby's feeding schedule, smiling at the tender scene before her. After she left, Dale stood, suddenly feeling the need to process everything that had happened. I need to take a short walk, he said, kissing Lila's forehead. Will you be all right for a few minutes? Lila nodded, still captivated by their daughter. We'll be fine. Take your time. Dale made his way through the quiet clinic halls until he found the small chapel. It was a simple room with wooden pews and a cross on the wall, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows to create pools of colored light on the floor. He knelt in one of the front pews, bowing his head. For a moment he simply breathed, letting the peace of the space wash over him. Then the words began to flow. Thank you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for this second chance that neither of us deserved. Thank you for bringing Lila into my life when I thought I was beyond healing. Thank you for grace, for this miracle that defied every medical prediction. Thank you for Clara's wisdom in writing that letter, for seeing what I couldn't see. Tears rolled down his cheeks as years of grief and guilt finally released their hold on his heart. He stayed there for several minutes, letting gratitude wash through him like a cleansing rain. When he finally stood, he felt lighter than he had in years. Walking back to Lila's room, he could hear her voice before he reached the door. She was sitting up in bed, humming softly to Grace, who was awake and watching her mother with rapt attention. The sight stopped Dale in his tracks. Sunlight surrounded them like a halo, and in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty what he needed to do. He entered the room quietly and knelt beside the bed, taking Lila's free hand in his. She looked at him questioningly, her humming trailing off. Lila, he said softly, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I know this might seem sudden, but nothing has ever been clearer to me. Will you marry me? When her eyes widened, he quickly continued. Not because of Grace, though she's the most precious gift we could have received, but because I love you, because you've taught me how to live again, how to feel joy again, because I want to spend the rest of my life watching you bring beauty back to broken things. Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Dale leaned in to kiss her softly, careful not to disturb Grace, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. The nurse who had been checking on them throughout the night chose that moment to come in with fresh supplies. Seeing their tears and smiles, she paused in the doorway, breaking into a warm smile of her own. Seems heaven's been busy here, she said kindly, her eyes twinkling. Dale and Lila looked at each other and burst into laughter, the joyful sound filling the small room with light. Grace joined in with a tiny coo, making them laugh even harder. The morning sun continued to pour through the window, bathing the new family in its warm glow as they reveled in their shared joy, their unexpected miracle, and the promise of all the days to come. The morning dawned crisp and clear over the Colorado mountains, painting the ranch in shades of gold. Dew sparkled on the grass like scattered diamonds, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wild roses through the air. Under the massive oak tree that had stood sentinel over the property for more than 100 years, white chairs formed neat rows on the lawn. Mrs. Avery bustled about the main house, directing the setup crew with practiced efficiency while cradling baby Grace in one arm. The infant, dressed in a delicate white dress with tiny pink ribbons, watched the proceedings with wide, curious eyes. "Now careful with those flower arrangements," Mrs. Avery called out to the helpers. "Those roses came straight from the garden Miss Lila restored." Her voice softened as she looked down at Grace. "Your mama brought those flowers back to life, just like she brought life back to this whole ranch." Upstairs, Lila stood before the mirror in what had once been Clara's dressing room, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed the simple white dress she'd chosen. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was perfect, classic and elegant, just like the woman who'd helped bring her and Dale together. A knock at the door made her turn. "Come in," she called softly. Mrs. Avery entered, Grace cooing in her arms. "Oh, my dear," she breathed, taking in the sight of Lila. "You look absolutely beautiful." Lila's eyes filled with tears as she reached for her daughter. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered, holding Grace close. "Any of this. A home, a family, love. The Lord works in mysterious ways," Mrs. Avery said, dabbing at her own eyes. "And sometimes his greatest gifts come wrapped in our deepest hurts." She moved to adjust Lila's veil. "Now, let me tell you something. I've known Dale Cole since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, and I've never seen him as alive as he's been since you came into his life." Through the window, they could see cars beginning to arrive, familiar vehicles from town, carrying the same people who had witnessed Lila's humiliation at the auction just months ago. But today, they stepped out of their cars in their Sunday best, faces solemn with regret and wonder. "They're all here," Lila murmured, spotting faces she recognized. "Of course they are," Mrs. Avery said firmly. "A miracle has a way of changing hearts, and you, my dear, are living proof of that." Downstairs, Dale adjusted his tie in the study mirror, his thoughts drifting to Clara's letter. He pulled it from his pocket, reading the words one more time. "When the next miracle comes, don't run." He smiled, tucking it back safely. "I won't," he whispered. "Not ever again." A commotion outside drew his attention to the window. His heart clenched as he recognized Lila's father, standing uncertainly at the edge of the gathering crowd. The man looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched with the weight of shame. Dale watched as several townspeople approached him, their greetings cautious but not unkind. The pastor arrived, taking his place under the oak tree where masses of white roses and wild mountain flowers created a natural altar. Mrs. Avery had outdone herself, weaving Clara's favorite blooms with the new varieties Lila had planted, creating a stunning tribute to both past and present. As the guests settled into their seats, whispers of apology and amazement floated on the breeze. "Can you believe it?" one woman murmured. "A real miracle right here in our midst." "We were so wrong about her," another replied softly. "So very wrong." The music began. A sweet melody played on a single violin. Dale took his place beneath the oak tree, his heart pounding with joy and anticipation. Mrs. Avery stood nearby, holding Grace, who was now dressed in a tiny white dress that matched her mother's. When Lila appeared at the end of the flower-strewn aisle, a collective gasp rose from the assembled guests. She was radiant, her face glowing with happiness beneath her simple veil. She carried a bouquet of roses from her restored garden, each bloom a testament to her gentle determination to bring beauty from ashes. Dale felt his breath catch in his throat. As she walked toward him, he couldn't help but think of that night at the auction, how broken and afraid she'd looked. Now she moved with quiet confidence, her head held high, every step bringing her closer to the future they would build together. When she reached him, Dale took her hands in his, squeezing them gently. The pastor began the ceremony, but Dale barely heard the words. He was lost in Lila's eyes, seeing in them all the love and trust they'd found in each other. When it came time for his vows, Dale's voice rang out clear and strong across the gathering. "I didn't buy you," he declared, his words carrying to every corner of the property. "I found you, and I'll spend my life proving you're priceless." Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks as she responded with her own vows, her voice soft but steady. In Mrs. Avery's arms, Grace chose that moment to coo loudly, bringing gentle laughter from the guests. "By the power vested in me," the pastor proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." As Dale drew Lila into their first kiss as a married couple, the ranch's old bell tower began to ring, its joyful peals echoing across the valley and bouncing off the mountain peaks. The sound seemed to wash away the last shadows of the past, replacing them with hope and promise. The guests rose to their feet, applauding as Dale and Lila turned to face them. Rose petals showered down, caught by the mountain breeze and swirling around the newlyweds like nature's own celebration. Lila looked around at the ranch, her home now, taking in the restored gardens, the majestic mountains, and the faces of the community that had once scorned her, but now celebrated her joy. Her father stood at the back, tears streaming down his face, his expression a mixture of regret and gratitude. Mrs. Avery stepped forward, placing Grace in her mother's arms. Dale wrapped his arms around them both, and for a moment they stood together under the ancient oak tree, a family forged by faith, healing, and love. The bells continued to ring, their sound carrying far into the mountains, as if announcing to the world that sometimes the greatest miracles come disguised as ordinary moments, and the deepest loves grow from the most unexpected beginnings. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the ranch as the wedding guests gradually departed. The day's celebrations had been perfect, simple yet profound, much like the love story it celebrated. As twilight began to settle over the mountains, the last traces of sunlight caught the dewdrops on the roses, making them sparkle like tiny stars in the garden. Dale and Lila sat together on the wide wooden porch swing, their newborn daughter Grace sleeping peacefully between them, wrapped snugly in a soft white blanket. The gentle motion of the swing created a soothing rhythm that matched the peaceful evening atmosphere. From their vantage point, they could see the full splendor of what had once been Clara's garden, now restored to life through Lila's patient care. Where dead vines and weeds had once choked the earth, vibrant blooms now nodded in the evening breeze. Roses in shades of pink, red, and white climbed the trellises, their sweet fragrance carrying on the cool mountain air. Purple clematis and golden honeysuckle wound through the fence posts, while beds of wildflowers created waves of color beneath the spreading branches of the old oak tree. That oak tree, where just hours ago they had exchanged their vows, now stood sentinel over their happiness. Fireflies had begun to emerge as dusk deepened, their tiny lights dancing beneath its branches like nature's own celebration. The soft, intermittent glow reminded Lila of stars, falling to earth, each flash a small miracle in itself. Dale wrapped his arm gently around Lila's shoulders, drawing her closer. She fit perfectly against him, as if they had been designed to comfort each other this way. Baby Grace stirred slightly between them, her tiny fingers flexing in her sleep before settling again. The sight made both parents smile, their hearts full of wonder at this precious life they had been given. The evening air carried the lingering scents of the wedding flowers mixed with the fresh mountain pine. In the distance, a whip-poor-will called softly, its evening song echoing across the valley. The peaceful sounds of the ranch settling for the night surrounded them, horses nickering in their stalls, crickets beginning their evening chorus, the soft rustle of aspen leaves in the breeze. Lila leaned her head against Dale's shoulder, breathing in the moment. Her hand rested protectively on Grace's blanket, feeling the gentle rise and fall of their daughter's breathing. The events of the past months seemed almost dreamlike now. The auction, her arrival at the ranch, the miracle of Grace's conception, the fear and joy that had brought them to this moment. "I still don't understand why me," she whispered, her voice carrying a note of lingering amazement. The question wasn't born of doubt anymore, but rather of humble gratitude. How had she, once deemed worthless by her own family, found such profound happiness? Dale was quiet for a moment, his hand moving to cover hers where it rested on Grace's blanket. When he spoke, his voice was soft but filled with certainty. Because miracles don't choose the deserving. They choose the willing. His words settled over them like a blessing. Lila felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were tears of joy, of understanding that sometimes the greatest acts of faith were simply being open to possibility, to hope, to love. The stars began to appear above the mountains, first one, then dozens, then hundreds, until the sky was alive with their light. The moon rose too, full and bright, casting silver shadows across the garden below. Its gentle radiance illuminated the flowers, turning the white roses to pearl and silvering the leaves of every plant. Grace stirred again, but this time her eyes fluttered open. Instead of crying, she looked up at her parents with bright eyes and broke into a sudden, delighted laugh, that pure, innocent sound that only babies can make. The unexpected joy of it made both Dale and Lila laugh too, their happiness echoing across the peaceful evening. The garden before them glowed in the moonlight, each flower and leaf a testament to renewal. What had once been dead and forgotten now bloomed with vibrant life. The transformation was more than just physical, it was a living metaphor for their own journey. Like the garden, their lives had been restored, made new again through love, faith, and patience. They sat together in peaceful silence, their small family, complete. The soft sounds of their daughter's occasional happy coos mingled with the evening's natural symphony. The garden stretched out before them, bathed in moonlight, living proof that no life is ever beyond redemption, and that faith, once planted, always finds its way to bloom. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.